The 2020 election has brought a new intensity to the long fight for who gets to vote and how. States across the country, led by Republican legislatures, have passed laws that add some restrictions to voting. And on the federal level, Democrats are trying to pass one of the most sweeping pieces of election legislation in this country's history. President Joe Biden's administration has taken note as well, filing a case against the state of Georgia trying to roll back one of their recent election laws.
Our complaint challenges several provisions of SB 202 on the grounds that they were adopted with the intent to deny or abridge Black citizens equal access to the political process.
Here's an inside look at how the fight over how people vote is going. Democrats were really fired up after the 2020 election, given former President Donald Trump's pretty extensive lies that he won an election he actually lost. Republican legislatures have enacted laws in several states that somehow add new barriers to voting. Proposals in many of these states to add new criminal penalties for election workers, add new tweaks to mail voting that just makes it more onerous to vote via the mail. Federal Democrats in Congress have been considering one of the largest pieces of election legislation called the For the People Act, sometimes referred to as H.R. 1. It would basically remake every aspect of American elections,
from expanding access to ballot boxes and reducing the influence of big money in politics.
Where things stand right now for H.R. 1, in June, there was a vote that was filibustered by Republicans. It was 50-50. All Democrats voted to advance to debate, all Republicans voted to not advance to debate. Even in a universe where the filibuster didn't exist, H.R. 1 is not particularly close to becoming law because there's not universal agreement among Democrats about what the bill should do.
The fundamental purpose of our democracy is the freedom of our elections.
This may be the end of the road for H.R. 1, and the reason is pretty simple. It's the filibuster. It basically requires 60 votes in the Senate. There will not be 10 Republicans who support this legislation. So Democrats really have that binary choice. It's if they do come to an agreement on a piece of legislation, can they get rid of the filibuster? And there seems to be no movement there. Republicans broadly don't support H.R. 1, and for a lot of different reasons. Republicans say that they oppose it because it's the federalization of elections. In the U.S., we have a pretty diffuse election system. There's 50 states in the District of Columbia, so that means there's 51 different ways that elections are run.
This lawsuit is the first of many steps we are taking to ensure that all eligible voters can cast a vote and that every voter has access to accurate information.
The Biden administration announced that it is suing the state of Georgia over some of the provisions in its recently passed elections law. The Department of Justice is claiming that several of the provisions target minority voters after the 2020 election. They're trying to argue that the law was, in fact, passed with discriminatory intent. Major Supreme Court decision on voting rights is probably the 2013 Shelby County decision.
Now, like many others across the country, I am deeply disappointed with the court's decision in this matter. This decision represents a serious setback for voting rights.
What that did was it struck down a key provision of the Voting Rights Act called preclearance. Preclearance requires certain states and jurisdictions to get their laws pre-approved by either the Department of Justice or a DC-based court before they can go into effect.
Recently, the Supreme Court ruled in Brnovich v. DNC that a pair of Arizona laws were constitutional, but the big thing with this decision was not that these laws were constitutional, it's what it does to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
I'm stunned by this decision. The Supreme Court upheld voting restrictions. They might have written it and said they upheld voting laws.
The Supreme Court, the 6-3 conservative majority, did not totally strike down Section 2, but it added a bunch of guideposts that many election lawyers and many civil rights groups expect to make it much, much harder to challenge laws saying that they're discriminatory. You could see more conservative legislators passing laws that they now think may have a better chance of standing up in court. And Democrats are at least hoping that this will kind of kickstart the stalled efforts to pass legislation on the federal level in response to the Republican legislation across the country and states.
What the Biden administration plans to do next on voting rights is the million-dollar question. The president and Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the point person for the administration for voting rights, are certainly doing public events about it, but everyone's in a wait-and-see mode right now to kind of see what the next steps are.